Today, I'm just gonna give a few thoughts on an incredible memoir published posthumously by an author, a neurosurgeon, Kalanithi. I'm sorry, Paul Kalanithi. Uh, you can see it. See if I can get into the frame. Yeah, and it's entitled "When Breath Becomes Air." And this is an incredible book. As I said, it was published posthumously. It was sort of compiled from notes that he had on his computer as he was dying of inoperable lung cancer, which he suspected it had gotten into remission immediately, and he describes this in the book. The initial dislocation he felt when he was given what he suspected was a pretty imminent death sentence, and he realized early on that he had lung cancer even before he was diagnosed. This was an incredibly perceptive, very talented and very skilled neurosurgeon who was just completing his residency. So he kind of put together, kind of did his own internal WebMD and realized he was he was he had a very serious problem, and it probably was lung cancer, and that's what it turned out to be. And the initial diagnosis seemed very foreboding, and it kind of sent him into a bit of a tailspin because he had been planning a career as not only a neurosurgeon but a neuroscientist and a professor performing pioneering, groundbreaking work. And even in his relatively short life, he still accomplished a lot in his field. And excuse me, a little bit of a cough, but the fact is, he had planned this life for himself that was in tatters, basically, because of this diagnosis. And he got in contact with an oncologist he was put in touch with an oncologist who was able to treat him with a new anti-cancer drug. And just to make a long story short, he thought that it went into remission, only to discover later on that new tumors had grown. So one of the things this forced him to do was to withdraw from surgery from his patients. And one of the interesting things about this book is this autobiography is his description of why he chose this field. It was basically so that he could have a better understanding of the relationship that we have with our life and the finitude of our time on Earth, and act as kind of a shepherd. And he even mentions the fact that he probably would have become a pastor if he had more religious conviction as a child. And that was what he wanted to do. He thought that by having his hands on and his being present with people who were making that journey from life to death. It would help him to have a better understanding of this. And the discovery at the after he is faced with this, and he says this should have been an amazing opportunity, since this was what he was looking for, being given a diagnosis which meant that he had a very short time to live, although his doctor never specified how long until towards the very end, where she said with some hope that he might have 5 years. But it turns out that this opportunity, he wasn't prepared for it. When it did happen, he was just as lost and as confused as anyone else when they're given this diagnosis, this life-altering diagnosis, and presented with the idea that we all have lurking in the back of our minds that we're eventually going to cease to exist. So it turns out that all of those years of studying and all those years of preparing for this moment didn't really prepare him for this moment. I think that's one of the lessons that you can draw from this book. And this book really is, it's really a testament to how a little faith can do really great things. And he was born, he grew up in Westchester, upstate New York, to two parents who were very devoted Christians from India, from Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. And he sort of fell away from the faith, and he even describes this in the book, Becoming an Atheist. And trying to search for meaning outside of the context of Jesus Christ, and how it was impossible because science is a very good in terms of prescriptive descriptive notions, but in terms of prescriptive values, it's not really that helpful. It can't answer humanity's search for meaning, even if you're able to have a better grasp of the way our anatomy works, or the way the natural world functions at a microscopic level. And there are some things, for example, the brain, where the knowledge is still very very primitive, even today, where we can perform brain surgeries. And he describes in the book the care that had to be taken when performing brain surgery, so that you didn't injure the hypothalamus and create wreckage in this patient's life for the rest of his or her existence. You had to the precision that was required for this is almost unimaginable. But even there, we still have a very modest view of how our brains work. And the thing is, in terms of deriving meaning and understanding why we're here, you can't really get into answer these metaphysical questions without looking to God. And this was something he understood eventually as an adult. And one of the last things that he did a few weeks before, in public at least, was go to the church with his parents and his wife. And I think this was after the birth of his daughter. And let me see if I can find the hymn that's mentioned in the epilogue. Give me a second. The lyrics from a hymn derived from the Pilgrim's Progress, which is a that's another very worthwhile book, although it's fiction. It was written by someone who had serious doubts, even though he was a fervent believer. He had serious doubts about his salvation, but anyway, here's lyrics derived from the Pilgrim's Progress. Who would true valor see? Let him come hither. Then fancies fly away. He'll not fear what men say. He'll labor night and day to be a pilgrim. Paul's decision to look death in the eye was a testament not just to who he was in the final hours of his life, but who he had always been. For much of his life, Paul wondered about death and whether he could face it with integrity. In the end, the answer was yes, I was his wife and a witness. And that's from the epilogue to this book. And again, I would recommend you get it if you have a chance. When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. And it explores these issues of faith, of the distance between doctors and surgeons, people who probe and invade the private spaces of your body, and patients, and the arrogance to a large degree. And this was something he realized, of doctors presuming that they have the answers to everything. And this was something he experienced firsthand when right before he was going to graduate from his residency, he became deathly ill and started vomiting, and requested of an attending physician that he be given a specific anti-cancer medicine that he'd been treated for, and this physician refused to give it to him, and eventually just acceded to his request. But even then, he just did it as kind of hospital theater. He didn't actually get him the drug he wanted, and this was someone who was a brilliant neurosurgeon and had all of and should have been treated with like a colleague, but even he was treated because he was in a patient's gown, like his opinion or his thoughts didn't matter. And that's another very interesting aspect of this book, and why it's worth reading, the sort of realization that he comes to, that as a doctor who's turned into a patient, the experience he has and the realization that this is the way the medical industry treats people who are considered kind of like beneath their station. It's really interesting that, and like I said, the idea of having a little faith, someone, and being able to do great things like that, as it says in Scripture, that faith. If you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And I think this is a really, as his wife said, a testament to his character, and also to the God's grace to a large degree, this is what you'll find in the book. Like I said, when breath becomes air, it's definitely worth checking out if you have the